Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 290, Alexander Volkanovski versus Jair Rodriguez for the UFC featherweight title. And this card is just stacked with incredible fights. And this is going to be my full card predictions. I'm going to go through every single fight on the card and give you a quick breakdown and prediction. Starting off with the first fight of the night, Tatsuro Taira versus Edgar Cháirez, a short notice replacement fight. Taira was supposed to fight a couple weeks ago. His opponent missed weight. The fight got canceled. They moved him to UFC 290, and they found Edgar Cháirez to make his UFC debut on very short notice. And I know we've been seeing a lot of guys step in on short notice, making their UFC debut and win. But Edgar Cháirez has a tough task ahead of him. He's 10-4. He's 27 years old. He's coming in on only a 2-fight winning streak. He won his last 2 fights via submission. His last fight he won via armbar, and that was a hellacious finish where you probably saw it online. He choked out his opponent via triangle choke. The ref didn't stop it. He switched to an armbar on his unconscious opponent, wrenched the armbar. The ref still didn't stop it until his opponent finally woke up and tapped. The fight before that, he won via guillotine choke. The guy was 5-7. The fight before that, he fought on Dana White's Contender Series against Clayton Carpenter, got out-grappled, lost via decision. And he comes in against a guy in Tatsuro Taira who's 13-0, undefeated. 10 of those 13 wins are via finish, and 7 of those wins are via submission. He's looked incredible at 23 years old. He submitted Jesus Aguilar in his last fight via triangle in a flawless performance. He submitted CJ Vergara via armbar in the fight before that. And this guy at 23 years old just looks like an elite level grappler. Now, this fight is at 130 pounds catch weight. They are both flyweights. And Cháirez is a big flyweight typically. So I wonder if that's going to play any role in this fight. But Cháirez, he's just kind of a gritty striker who likes to move forward, kind of a lanky guy, but well-rounded. But look at the level of competition he's fought. His last fight, even when he won, he was losing a lot of that fight before he ended up getting the stoppage. He was getting taken down. He was getting struck. He was bloodied up a bit. He wasn't winning. It was not like he was dominating that fight and got a finish. He does have good stamina. He went 4 rounds in that fight. There's no doubt he's probably ready to go. But against a guy like Tatsuro Taira, even if he had a full camp and knew he was fighting for 2 months, I still feel like he's going to get out-grappled. I am going Tatsuro Taira via first-round submission, rear naked choke. I just think Taira is leaps and bounds better in the grappling. He'll be able to out-wrestle him. He'll be able to take him down. He'll be able to create scrambles. Clayton Carpenter was able to take him down. His last opponent was able to take him down. I'm sure Tatsuro Taira will be able to take him down, and he will ultimately find a submission. I just don't see a way where Edgar Cháirez can win this fight. Moving up on the card, we have Kamuela Kirk versus Esteban Ribovics. This is a fight where I think both guys are just going to be primarily striking. You look at Kirk, he's 11-5. He's coming in off a loss to Damon Jackson where he got out-grappled and submitted. He's 29 years old. He's 5'10 with a 75-inch reach. Got a 6-inch reach advantage over Ribovics, who has a 69-inch reach, who's 27 years old, 5'10". Both guys coming off a loss. Ribovics lost to Loic Razabov in his last fight. That was 3 months ago. He lost via decision. He just got out-grappled in this fight. When I look at both these guys, Kirk, his last win was against Makwan Amirkhani. He's been super inactive, only fought twice in the last 2 years. And Makwan Amirkhani was out-grappling him, and then he gassed out and basically lost the last 2 rounds. I see 2 primarily strikers. Kirk, super inactive, probably a better kicker, not even super, not only is his career inactive, he's not super active in throwing volume on the feet. He has good kicks. He has decent striking overall. You look at Ribovics, 11 of his wins, all by finish. And he has decent cardio, he has power in his hands. I am going with Esteban Ribovics via second round TKO. Kirk is just not active enough on the feet. He just primarily kicks. He doesn't have great striking. I know he has a 6-inch reach advantage, but I think Ribovics is the better striker, has more power, has more grit determination, has better stamina, has good combinations. I think ultimately, even if this goes to the decision, I could see maybe Kirk winning the first round, but I think this is going to be primarily standing, and I think Ribovics has the advantage on the feet and has the power advantage as well. I see him catching him in the second round and finishing him in the second round. Moving up on the card, we have Shannon Ross versus Jesus Aguilar. Shannon Ross, 13-7, 34 years old. Jesus Aguilar, 8-2, 27 years old. Shannon Ross coming in on a 2-fight losing streak, 2-fight stoppage losing streak at that. He lost to Clayton Rodriguez in his last fight, got TKO'd. And then the fight before that on Dana White's Contender Series, got TKO'd by Vinicius Salvador. And this is one of those fights, honestly, it's super low level. I think it could go either way. Even though Shannon Ross has been finished in his last 2 fights, he was actually really tough. He took a lot of damage before he finally got finished. And you look at Jesus Aguilar, he lost his last fight against Tatsuro Taira, but that's not a horrible loss to have. And he got triangled early in that fight. He's coming off Dana White's Contender Series as well. He's much younger, and that's what kind of makes this fight difficult to pick. You know, Shannon Ross actually, even though he's bottom of the barrel UFC, he's not as bad as his record would indicate. But at 34 years old, and when we're talking about his toughness, you know, that usually means you get beat up quite a bit and take a lot of damage. But Jesus Aguilar honestly has T-Rex arms. You know, I thought his reach would be much shorter than it actually is. But he's kind of gritty. He has decent wrestling. I think he'll mix it all together. I think this will be a close fight. I think Ross will have some moments on the feet. But I think Jesus Aguilar gets it done. I just think he's younger, he's faster, he's more well-rounded. He has submission ability. He could clip Shannon Ross on the feet and then maybe submit him as Ross looks for a takedown. But I think Aguilar will be able to out-grapple him, push him up against the fence, use that to set up the striking as well. And I'm going Jesus Aguilar 29-28. Moving up on the card, we have Cameron Saaiman versus Terrence Mitchell, which is actually kind of a disappointing matchup in a way, because this was originally supposed to be against Christian Rodriguez, who pulled out of the fight. I don't remember what it was, an injury or something. And you have Cameron Saaiman, who is 22 years old, looks super promising in the bantamweight division. He's 8-0, undefeated. He's 22 years old, 5'8", with a 67-inch reach. We don't even have a reach for Terrence Mitchell. That's how short notice this guy is stepping in, and we don't even have a lot of footage on him. All the footage I could find on him was like from 2018 and before. Some of them look like VHSs. You know, he's coming into this fight. He's 15-2, but he's been fighting forever. From what I've seen, he's fought Cháirez on The Ultimate Fighter, got finished by Cháirez, but that was years and years ago. There's really not a whole lot of footage to see on him that's recent, but he's coming in on a big winning streak, at least a 5-fight winning streak, but he's been kind of inactive. He's had 5 fights in almost 8 years. He's 33 years old, and I just think Cameron Saaiman is just super well-rounded. You know, as long as he doesn't get DQ'd in this fight, because in both of his UFC fights, he's had a point deduction. His last fight was against Manny Martinez. He kicked him in the nuts twice and eye poked him, got a point deduction. He ultimately won that fight via majority decision, but he could have lost that fight. I think one judge gave it a draw. The fight before that, his UFC debut, was against Steven Kozlow. He was getting out grappled early. Then in the second round, he started to come on strong, landed a knee to a downed opponent, got a point deducted there. So as long as he doesn't end up getting disqualified in this fight, I think he probably gets it done, because Terrence Mitchell, I mean, he's 33 years old. He's never made it to a big organization. He's, you know, fighting guys who are 4-1, 4-2, you know, 4-0, 3-3. And, you know, he's not being super active. And also, it's just he's an older guy who's fighting low-level competition. He's winning, but he's fighting super low-level competition. I think Cameron Saaiman gets it done. I think he's going to finish him in the second round. I just think he's just really good everywhere. He has good body kicks. I think he's a bit overrated. I think people are acting like Saaiman's some elite guy. I think he still has a lot to learn. I think he still has a lot of growing to do, but he's super young, and I think this is a tailor-made matchup for him. Terrence Mitchell, from what I could find of him, he was like a long, rangy striker, mixes in the grappling a little bit, has some decent power, but I don't think he's going to be able to get it done with this massive youth disadvantage. I think he's going to have a speed disadvantage, and I think Cameron Saaiman will get it done via second round TKO. Moving up on the card, we have Vitor Petrino versus Marcin Prachnio. This is a matchup that honestly should be relatively good. I'm looking forward to this matchup. Vitor Petrino is an absolute savage. He's 8-0, and he's just looked incredible. He's from Dana White's Contender Series. And this is another matchup where you have a massive age disadvantage. Marcin Prachnio is 34 years old to Petrino's 25 years old. You look at Petrino's last few fights, he beat Anton Turkalj. That was a crazy war where honestly most people thought he was going to win that fight, but it was back and forth. He wins via decision. Before that, he made his UFC, or he fought on Dana White's Contender Series, got a KO on Dana White's Contender Series. So he only has one fight in the UFC. You look at the reach, he has a 3-inch reach advantage. They're basically both the same height. You look at Marcin Prachnio, he has that win over William Knight where he was just leg kicking him to death, and William Knight was not doing anything in that fight. You look at the fight before that, he lost to Felipe Lins, who Felipe Lins is an okay fighter, just got a win over Maxim Grisham recently, but Felipe Lins was kind of lighting him up on the feet. And when I look at this matchup, I think, Prachnio probably has a little bit better kicks, but I think Petrino overall is a better fighter, just more well-rounded fighter. And I think he's just going to press forward, throw crazy haymakers, look to land wild power. And I think he also mix in the grappling as well. And I think Prachnio is going to try to hang out on the outside, kick the legs, and just look to land shots from the outside, look to use his kicks to win this fight. He's got all right grappling, but he can be taken down and out grappling. We saw it in his fight against Felipe Lins. And I just think Petrino in this fight can really do anything he wants to him. Pause. And, Prachnio, he's a finisher. I mean, 10 first-round TKOs, which is crazy, of his 16 wins. But I just don't think he's going to find a KO early. I think Petrino will start off a little bit patient, but I think eventually he will start to pour it on. And that's why I'm going Vitor Petrino via second-round TKO. I just think he's going to be putting it all together, the grappling, the striking, and I think eventually he's going to catch Marcin Prachnio and be able to just put him down and finish him via ground and pound. Moving up on the card, we have a rematch. We have Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menifield 2. The fight nobody really wanted, but for some reason it's happening. This is a matchup between two light heavyweights that honestly, borderline don't even belong on the roster. You have Jimmy Crute, who hasn't won a fight in almost 3 years. His last win was against Modestas Bukauskas. He's 27 years old. He's 6'2", 74-inch reach. So he has a 2-inch height advantage, but he actually has a 2-inch reach disadvantage against Alonzo Menifield. The first fight, Jimmy Crute was out grappling him early. But Alonzo Menifield was able to get up. I think Jimmy Crute looked for a guillotine, and then Alonzo Menifield just started lighting him up on the feet. Won the first round based off of damage, even though he got out grappled for the majority of the first round. Then in the second round, was just beating him up, and Jimmy Crute, his movement just looked terrible. Was beating him up, had some grappling, but wasn't able to really do any damage. Menifield, though, I think it was in the third round, Menifield started to slow down a bit. And then when I was talking about, I think is in the third round, Menifield grabs the cage on a takedown attempt from Jimmy Crute. It looked like Jimmy Crute was probably going to get the third round because Menifield was kind of gassing out. And he grabs the fence. And then there's a point deduction. So then he goes on to lose the third round. So therefore, you end up with a draw, and they decide to run this fight back. This is typical grappler versus striker. I honestly believe this fight could go either way. I don't trust either one of these guys whatsoever. Menifield has okay takedown defense, but Jimmy Crute early was just ragdolling him. So honestly, this is one of those fights where you either see Menifield just brutalizing him and maybe KOing or TKOing him, and landing those big power shots, because Crute's striking is absolutely atrocious. Honestly, the way he even walks makes me think he already has advanced CTE. But I also think, Jimmy Crute can take advantage of Menifield's horrible takedown defense, and that's why I am going Jimmy Crute via 29-28 decision. It was hard for me to make this pick. I honestly flipped and flopped back and forward. I thought Menifield maybe KOs him, but then I just started looking at the grappling of Jimmy Crute, and I think he's going to come into this fight. I think he's going to be a little bit more smarter. I think he's going to just control him a little bit. I think he maybe gets clipped in one of the rounds and loses the round because he almost gets finished. But Alonzo Menifield, once he blows his load, he's just not good anymore. He slowed down significantly in that third round. And I just see Jimmy Crute getting this done. I think it's going to be another wild fight, but I see Jimmy Crute getting it done 29-28 decision. Moving up on the card, we have Yazmin Jauregui versus Denise Gomes. This is one of those matchups. I think it's Denise E actually is pronounced. This is one of those matchups that actually I know a lot of people like to shit on women's MMA. This is a great fight. You should be excited for this fight. I'm happy that this fight is on the televised prelims because this is a great fight. Jauregui has 7 out of 10 wins by KO or TKO. She's super well-rounded. Denise Gomes has 5 out of 7 wins by KO or TKO. Both girls are actually future prospects in the strawweight division, to be honest. I was watching back some of their fights. They are both very good striking. Jauregui has just nonstop pressure and volume and never gets tired. Gomes, she has good power, good hands, decent grappling. Jauregui's undefeated 10-0. You have Gomes, who is 7-2. She lost to Luke Boomy, I think is how you pronounce her name. She got out grappled in that fight, but, not the worst loss to have. And then she finished Bruno Brazil in her last fight 2 months ago. Nasty right hands repeatedly, and then end up finishing her on the ground. Jauregui absolutely destroyed Estela Nunes. She got hurt in the first round, but then in the second round really put it on her. The pressure, the pace was unbelievable. She mixed in the grappling as well. And I think this is going to be a good matchup. I think this is going to be a close matchup. I think this is going to be one of those fights where it truly could go either way. But I am going Yazmin Jauregui via decision. I think she gets it done with her pressure and pace. I think she maybe has some moments where she gets clipped with a big right hand and hurt. But I think ultimately her pressure and pace, she gets it done via decision. Moving up on the card, we have Della Maddalena versus Josiah Harrell. This is another short notice replacement fight. I mean, this is super disappointing. It was originally supposed to be Della Maddalena versus Sean Brady. Josiah Harrell stepping in on short notice on literally a week's notice against Della Maddalena is a tough task. Della Maddalena, 14-2, 26 years old, coming off that nasty win over Randy Brown where he hurt him, face planted him on the feet, and then eventually got a rear naked choke. The fight before that, he beat Danny Roberts. I mean, Della Maddalena is just a finisher. 13 of 14 wins via finish. 4 straight first round finishes in the UFC. The guy looks like a future contender. He looks like he'll be the future of the top 10 of the welterweight division. He hasn't really been tested in terms of grappling yet, which is why the Sean Brady fight was so interesting. But this isn't going to be it. You know, Josiah Harrell is not a great fighter. He's 7-0, but look at the level of competition he's fighting. A guy who's 9-8 in his last fight, guy who's 5-0. He's 24 years old. You know, he has a 7-inch reach disadvantage in this fight. I think Della Maddalena is going to go out there and absolutely bulldoze him, and that's why I am going Della Maddalena via first round TKO. I just think he's going to kind of bum rush him. He's going to be slamming the leg kicks, and he's just going to land hooks on the feet, drop him badly, and finish him via ground and pound. I literally think Della Maddalena will finish him in the first 2 minutes of the fight. I do not believe that this fight will be particularly long. Moving up on the card, we have Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price. This is such a tough fight for me to pick. This is the headliner of the prelims. Robbie Lawler, a legend. This is his retirement fight. Robbie Lawler has been around forever. He's been around forever. Former welterweight champion. Absolute savage. But he's getting old. He's 41 years old. Lost a lot of his fights recently, and he lost his last fight against Bryan Barberena. He was winning early and then eventually gets finished in the second round. Bryan Barberena just throwing unbelievable volume in that fight. The fight before that, he beat Nick Diaz. That's a fight where Nick Diaz quit. You have Nico Price, who lost his last fight against Philip Rowe, but he looked good in that fight, honestly. I mean, he didn't look great in the fight, but he had his moments in the fight is what I mean to say. And, you know, Nico Price is 33 years old, so he's 8 years younger than Robbie Lawler, and Robbie Lawler is just slowing down. The head movement ain't what it used to be. The striking ain't what it used to be. The speed isn't what it used to be, and it's heartbreaking. It's honestly heartbreaking. I'm really rooting for Robbie Lawler in this one, but I'm going with Nico Price via decision. I just didn't have it in me to pick Nico Price via TKO, and I think Robbie Lawler, Nico Price isn't necessarily known for having like crazy power, but he does move forward. And I do think Robbie Lawler is the better striker. He showed some excellent striking in the Bryan Barberena fight, and I think he can win this fight, and I almost picked Robbie Lawler, but then I thought maybe I was being biased by picking Robbie Lawler. I just think Nico Price will find a shot. I think he'll be losing this fight. I think he'll find a shot that hurts Robbie Lawler, and then Lawler won't be the same for the rest of the fight. Maybe Price doesn't find the finish, but I think Lawler will be kind of on wobbly legs, and sometimes when Robbie Lawler starts to get overwhelmed with volume, he just kind of rolls with the punches and doesn't really throw back. We've seen it in the Colby Covington fight. But I will say, Robbie Lawler, even though he's been losing a lot of fights recently, the Bryan Barberena fight he looked good in. The last fight he lost before that, Neil Magny, just got out-grappled in. The fight before that was against Colby Covington, and then the fight before that was against Ben Askren, where he almost got the finish in the first round. That was 4 years ago? How is that even possible? But ultimately, I just think Nico Price has more volume. I think he's just younger, and I think Robbie Lawler is just kind of losing a step. I'm praying to the MMA gods that he wins this fight, but ultimately I'm going Nico Price via decision, and it would not shock me if we end up with a Nico Price via third round TKO. Moving up the card to the pay-per-view portion of the card, we have Bo Nickal versus Tresean Gore. Bo Nickal's 4-0. That's crazy to me. Coming off of Dana White's Contender Series, has one fight in the UFC against Jamie Pickett, submitted him via arm triangle after taking him down, after kneeing him in the nuts. Bo Nickal has fought nothing but grocery store cashiers to this point. Tresean Gore, maybe a slight step up in competition. Tresean Gore has okay wrestling, good power. Tresean Gore's 4-2, so the experience-wise, it kind of makes sense. But Tresean Gore coming in off a win over Josh Frem. Before that, he lost to Cody Brundage, got out-grappled, and then eventually finished by Cody Brundage, brutalized by Cody Brundage. The fight before that, he lost to Brian Battle via decision. I think that was the Ultimate Fighter finale. He's 29 years old. They're both basically the same height, 1 inch reach advantage for Bo Nickel. I have a rule of thumb. If you lost to Cody Brundage, I will not pick you in any fight whatsoever. I'm going Bo Nickel first round submission. I just think the grappling of Bo Nickel is too much for Tresean Gore if Cody Brundage is taking you down at will. And I just think Bo Nickel, whether it's a submission or a TKO via ground and pound, I think Bo Nickel's grappling, even though I believe it's a bit overhyped, I think Bo Nickel's grappling in this fight, he'll be able to get Tresean Gore down and eventually find a submission. I think Bo Nickel is going to be shooting early and often. And we'll see. Jamie Pickett was able to defend some takedowns up against the fence. We'll see if Tresean Gore can do the same. And I do think there is a slight chance Tresean Gore could pull off an upset because he is very powerful on the feet, and Bo Nickel's striking isn't the greatest by any means, even though he's calling out top 10 guys. But ultimately, I think Bo Nickel's wrestling background and his just offensive wrestling in general against a guy like Tresean Gore, who really, I say Bo Nickel's beating up grocery store cashiers. I don't even know if Tresean Gore's a grocery store manager, okay? So I think Bo Nickel gets it done. I think he's able to drag him to the ground. I think he pushes him against the fence early, drags him to the ground early. Maybe you have a moment where Tresean Gore whiffs on some big punches, but I think ultimately Bo Nickel gets him down. I'm going to say Bo Nickel first round submission arm triangle. Moving up on the card, this main card is so good. We have Jalen Turner versus Dan Hooker. This fight should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to this matchup in the lightweight division. Jalen Turner, he's 13-6, but that record really doesn't tell the prospects of him as a future contender in the division. I mean, he has looked incredible. Even in his last fight, he fought Mateusz Gamrot. Mateusz Gamrot came in on short notice, but Mateusz Gamrot, massively different style than Dan Hooker, who was originally supposed to fight Jalen Turner back at UFC 285. Jalen Turner's 28 years old, 6'3", with a 75.5-inch reach. What actually shocked me is him and Dan Hooker have the same reach, but Turner has a 3-inch height advantage. Dan Hooker's getting up there in age. He's 33 years old. He's coming off a win over Claudio Puelles, but Claudio Puelles is literally a bum. He was dragging his ass on the canvas the whole entire fight. Eventually gets finished via TKO, via body kick. The fight before that, Dan Hooker got absolutely slaughtered by Arnold Allen. The fight before that, he got his arm ripped off by Islam Makhachev. The last win before that was against Nasrat Haqparast. He won via decision. And then the fight before that, he got brutally finished by Michael Chandler. Dan Hooker's been on the decline for a while. I wholeheartedly believe that Dustin Poirier took his soul back in 2020. And Jalen Turner's a guy who some people are arguing he won the Gamrot fight. And Gamrot was his worst stylistic possible matchup for a short notice fight because Turner's hole in his game is kind of his grappling. Dan Hooker's not going to use offensive grappling in this fight. Dan Hooker's going to look to strike, look to land combinations, look to land that step-in knee, but he's not going to land that step-in knee on Jalen Turner because Jalen Turner has the height advantage on him. And I just think Jalen Turner is going to go out there and literally beat the brakes off of Dan Hooker badly. I mean, Jalen Turner brutalized Brad Riddell, rocked him literally in like the first minute, and then guillotined Brad Riddell. He destroyed Jamie Malarkey. He beat Uros Mektic, submitted him, hurt him badly, then submitted him. Jalen Turner, I think, is the future of the lightweight division. I know we've seen a lot of these guys who it looks like they're going to be the future, like Rafael Fiziev, who I still think can be the future, but lose to Justin Gaethje. Jalen Turner's already ranked above Dan Hooker, but I think he's going to prove that he's much better than Dan Hooker, and Dan Hooker's on the decline. I think Jalen Turner just has a crazy variety of attacks. I think he's going to be lighting Dan Hooker up on the feet early and often, leg kicking him, body kicks, head kicks, and I think Jalen Turner, he either hurts him badly and then finds a guillotine finish while Dan Hooker's like shooting in on a desperation takedown, or he just steamrolls him and finishes him with nasty combinations. I mean, Jalen Turner has unbelievable killer instinct, and he has great combinations as well, and he mixes in everything very well. Meanwhile, Dan Hooker's 33 years old, slowing down, been finished, down a weight class against Arnold Allen. I am going Jalen Turner late first round TKO. I just think he's going to land a head kick, rock Dan Hooker, start swarming him with shots, mixing in knees to the body while he's lighting him up with combinations upstairs. And I think Jalen Turner finishes Dan Hooker in the first round. Moving up on the card, the featured fight of the card, we have Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis, or Dracus du Plessis. I can't remember how to pronounce it every time. This is a fight that's very interesting because supposedly, according to Dana White, this is a #1 contender fight for the middleweight division. Robert Whittaker will get the trilogy with Israel Adesanya, or Dricus du Plessis will be fresh meat for Israel Adesanya, supposedly at UFC 293 in September. Robert Whittaker has shown he is the best fighter in the middleweight division outside of Israel Adesanya. And without Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker would still be the champion, in my opinion. Robert Whittaker's still very young, though. He's only 32 years old. It's not like he's getting up there in age. He's 24-6. His last fight, he outclassed Marvin Vettori. The fight before that, he lost to Israel Adesanya via very close decision. The fight before that, he beat Kelvin Gastelum, completely outclassed him. The fight before that, he beat Jarrett Cannonier, pretty much outclassed him. I think he got rocked in the third round, but either way, outclassed him. The fight before that, he beat up Darren Till. So Robert Whittaker, his overall career has looked incredible. He has wins over Yoel Romero. He beat Brunson back when Brunson was actually decent. And then you have Dricus du Plessis, who I think he's one of the worst top-ranked fighters I have ever seen in my entire life. I'm horrible at picking Dricus du Plessis fights. I've picked against him against Derek Brunson. He proved me wrong. I picked against him against Darren Till. He proved me wrong. I picked against him against Brad Tavares. He proved me wrong. But every fight in the UFC for Dricus du Plessis, it seems like he's getting hurt in that fight. And Dricus du Plessis, his cardio is not good. I know he's got his nose fixed, and we'll see. But he's breathing through his mouth. That doesn't stop the fact that he's slowing down. But what I will say about Dricus du Plessis, he has unbelievable heart, and he will never quit. Some guys, when they start to lose, they start to pack it in. Dricus du Plessis, 29 years old, and he's still growing. He's still getting better. But I just don't think his skill set, where it is currently right now, is good enough to beat a prime Robert Whittaker, unless Robert Whittaker's coming in injured. And Robert Whittaker's even come out and said, look, I think a lot of people, their problem has been underestimating Dricus du Plessis, and I will not do that. And Dricus du Plessis, I have to give him credit where credit's due. The guy never stops moving forward. The guy has unbelievable heart, maybe some of the best heart in the UFC. He will get beaten and battered, and he will continue to move forward. He was getting beat up by Derek Brunson in the first round of their fight, and then he came back in the second round and got a finish there. Corner stoppage, but he was destroying him. It probably should have been stopped in the last 3 seconds. The fight before that, Darren Till, he was ragdolling him early, then almost got finished in the second round, took some damage from Darren Till in the second round. I don't know if I should say almost finished, but he took some damage from Darren Till in the second round. It looked like the momentum was all going in Darren Till's favor, and then he came back and finished him in the third round. The Brad Tavares win. Brad Tavares is very good, underrated opponent, in my opinion. Probably the best win of Dricus du Plessis' career. That was an absolute war, took a lot of damage, won that fight via unanimous decision. And I just think, though, overall, du Plessis' level of competition is nowhere near the level of competition that Robert Whittaker's faced. Derek Brunson, at that point in time, was a dead body. That was the second time in a row his corner had thrown in the towel. And Brunson looked good early, was able to out-grapple him early, was able to even outstrike him early, where he's just rushing forward, throwing wild, crazy strikes with his chin square up in the air. And Dricus does have power. He does have power. Maybe he can clip Robert Whittaker, but I think outside of a fluke win for Dricus, I don't see how he gets it done against Whittaker. Unless Whittaker somehow slips on a banana peel, gets injured, eats a leg kick from Dricus and gets injured, or just somehow walks into a big shot, I see Robert Whittaker putting on a masterclass performance in this fight. I think the first round, Whittaker is going to start off slow because I think Whittaker is going to be a little bit cautious. He knows Dricus has good power, and Dricus is going to be looking for big shots, and Dricus likes to blitz forward and throw combinations. But I think after Whittaker kind of gets a gauge of him and du Plessis starts to slow down a little bit after that first round, I think Robert Whittaker's really going to start to pick it up. And I see a second round TKO for Robert Whittaker. I think Robert Whittaker is going to throw a punch, land that head kick right afterwards. He loves throwing that combinations where he'll pump out the jab and then throw the head kick right behind. He'll kind of blind his opponent. I think he's going to get Dricus du Plessis' number. He's going to get his timing in that first round. And then in the second round, Robert Whittaker is just going to beat the brakes off of him and finish him in the second round. But even if it goes to decision, I see a 30-27 win for Robert Whittaker. barring an injury, I just don't see how Dricus du Plessis can get it done in this fight. I just don't see it. It has to be an injury. I think Robert Whittaker gets it done, but we've seen crazier upsets. Who would have thought Guram Kutateladze would have lost last week? But I think this would be an even crazier upset. I don't care what the numbers or the odds are. I just think that Robert Whittaker is at a level that du Plessis cannot reach or has not reached yet. I wonder what his cardio is going to look like. I wonder what his output is going to look like. If he can crack Whittaker, and maybe Whittaker's like out on his feet and not there for the rest of the fight, maybe du Plessis can get it done. But I just think Whittaker could out-grapple him if he wanted to. I think he could take down du Plessis, hold him down and control him and beat him up on the ground. I think he can mix that in. I think he'll be battering him with kicks. I think he'll be teeping him to the body. I think he'll be throwing oblique kicks because du Plessis loves that forward momentum and that forward pressure, spamming combinations. But Whittaker has too good of head movement, too good of footwork. And this isn't a small cage. This will be in a big cage. So that's a massive advantage for Robert Whittaker. And I just think ultimately Dricus du Plessis is out of his element against a guy like Robert Whittaker, and I think Robert Whittaker gets it done. Official prediction, second round TKO. Moving up on the card, we have Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja III. I guess it's technically 3. One of the fights happened on the Ultimate Fighter. What a tough fight this is to pick. This is for the UFC flyweight title. What a matchup this is. They have fought twice before. Alexandre Pantoja has 2 wins over Brandon Moreno, but it was years ago. One was back in 2016. One was back in 2018. One of them, the one that's further away, 2016, he finished him via rear naked choke. The second one, he beat the brakes off him, won via dominant decision. But 2018 was 5 years ago. Both fighters are vastly different. Brandon Moreno has improved so much throughout his career. Brandon Moreno has just looked so good in his last few fights. I mean, Moreno's 21-6. It's crazy. He lost to Pantoja, got cut from the UFC, came back, won one fight, came back, and it's just looked so good. And the level of competition that he's faced has been incredible. And he got the belt. He got the fight on short notice against Deiveson Figueiredo, fought to a draw, got the rematch, won the rematch via rear naked choke in dominant fashion, got the trilogy, lost it via decision, but it was a razor close fight. Could have went either way. And then they wanted to book the quadrilogy. Figgy didn't want it. So in the meantime, Brandon Moreno said, okay, I'll take on Cháirez for the interim belt. Goes out there, has a good performance against Cháirez, finishes him with a body kick, and then rematches Deiveson Figueiredo earlier this year at UFC 283 and finishes Deiveson Figueiredo via doctor stoppage. Was landing on the feet, busted up his eye, and eventually got a doctor stoppage because Deiveson Figueiredo's eye was closed. So Brandon Moreno has looked incredible. He's only 29 years old, 5'7", so he has a 2-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage on Alexandre Pantoja. But Pantoja has looked incredible recently as well. Went out there, just walked Alex Perez down, was landing good shots, created some back exposure, got his back, and submitted him via neck crank in the first round. He fought literally like a video game character. The fight before that against Brandon Royval, it was a great fight. The first round was incredible. It was a scrappy fight for both guys, back and forth fight for both guys. And then eventually in the second round, Brandon Royval overextends with a punch, leads to Pantoja, getting him down, getting his back, and finishes him via rear naked choke. And Brandon Royval is on the cusp of a title shot right now. So that's a great win. I know that was a little over a year and a half ago, but still great win. Then the fight before that, he beat Manel Kopp. Manel Kopp, surging contender in the division. This was a kind of a close fight. There wasn't a whole lot of grappling in this fight. But Pantoja gets it done, just marches him down, lands some good shots on the feet. I think he may have gotten a takedown or two in this fight. I can't remember for sure. But Manel Kopp, very good movement in this fight. And it was a very close competitive fight. Probably the most competitive fight of the last few for Pantoja. His last loss was almost 3 years ago to Askar Askarov. And Askar Askarov was able to out-grapple him and take him down and land some shots on the feet. This was a close fight. Askar Askarov gets it done. But that's 3 years ago. Pantoja's 33 years old. He's getting up there in age, but arguably getting into his prime. A lot of people think your prime years are like 30 to 34, somewhere around there. But for flyweight, 33 years old is a little getting up there in age. But this is such a tough fight to pick because Pantoja has 2 wins over Brandon Moreno. So it's kind of hard to get that out of your mind, even though that was so long ago. And then also, even if you kind of try to ignore that a little bit, Pantoja has just elite level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and unbelievable submission skills. And the way he fights, he has great striking too, powerful shots. He walks guys down, throws big, powerful shots, waits for them to make a mistake, and then ends up on their back and then is looking for a submission. One thing I did notice going back and watching some of Pantoja's fights, if he doesn't get a super dominant position on the ground, he's not as, able to be able to find a finish from like guard or something like that. Unless he gets your back, gets that body triangle. Once he gets on your back, he's super dangerous. But outside of that back position, he's still dangerous and he'll find his way to that back. But he's just not as dangerous in terms of submission ability. But Brandon Moreno, I think he has a wrestling advantage. I think he has a striking advantage. I think Pantoja has a power advantage. But the one massive advantage I do see for Brandon Moreno is his cardio advantage. We've seen Pantoja slow down in the third round of only 3-round fights. This is a 5-round title fight. So I see maybe cardio being an issue for Pantoja. And for my official prediction for this fight, I am going Brandon Moreno via 4th round TKO. I think this is going to be a very competitive fight. I think this is going to be an excellent fight. But I think Pantoja, the way he fights is not conducive to a 5-round fight, 25 minutes. And I think Brandon Moreno's style is. And I also think, again, Pantoja, even though he has the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu advantage, I think Moreno's very good on the ground as well. And I think Moreno can survive on the ground with him. And not only that, I think Moreno will start off being very patient on the feet, not throwing a whole lot of kicks, just using his boxing, avoiding the big shots of Pantoja. And then I think as the fight goes on, I think Brandon Moreno will even mix in the wrestling a little bit. Just take Pantoja down, maybe work on him a little bit, but then get back to his feet and kind of disengage. Because I think he can take him down. I think he can out-wrestle him. I think Pantoja has the jiu-jitsu advantage, and in a scramble, maybe he gets Moreno's back, and that's going to be super dangerous. But I think Moreno has good enough grappling, good enough wrestling. I don't think that Pantoja is going to be able to easily get him down and find his back. But I think this is going to be a great fight because I think early Pantoja is going to come out just walking him down, throwing big shots, just hoping to create an exchange where next thing you know, Brandon Moreno's kind of turning away from him. Maybe he trips, maybe he slips throwing a shot, and the next thing you know, Pantoja's on his back with a body triangle. And I think if he does get that position, Pantoja will be able to find a rear naked choke from that position if he gets it early enough in the round. But ultimately, I think Brandon Moreno fights very smart early, uses his boxing, doesn't throw a whole lot of kicks because Pantoja might try to catch him and take him down. And I think Brandon Moreno just works on him. He just works him over with the striking. Then he mixes in a takedown or two. And then Pantoja's shooting in on takedowns and Moreno's defending them well. And I think Pantoja is going to start to get tired and start to wear down. And Brandon Moreno, we know he can go a hard 5 rounds. We've seen him go a hard 5 rounds with Deiveson Figueiredo multiple times. And I think in that 4th round, Pantoja is going to be exhausted. I think he's going to be gassed out. I don't think he's going to have conserved his energy enough. And I think Brandon Moreno is going to catch him on the feet, hurt him badly, drop him, and then finish him off with ground and pound. And basically, it's going to be more of the exhaustion of Pantoja than the power of Brandon Moreno. But I think Brandon Moreno retains his flyweight title in the 4th round via TKO. Moving on to the main event, we have Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez for the featherweight title, unifying the belts. It's interim champion Yair Rodriguez versus undisputed champion Alexander Volkanovski. And what a matchup this is. I am beyond excited for this fight because this is the first fight in a while I feel like there is a legit threat to Alexander Volkanovski at featherweight. Before, I just never really felt that threat to Volkanovski. I didn't think Max Holloway was going to beat him in any of those fights. I didn't think Ortega was going to beat him. I didn't think Korean Zombie was going to beat him. I think Yair Rodriguez can legitimately beat Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 290. And that's what makes this fight so compelling. You look at Volkanovski, 25-2, hasn't lost, at featherweight in so many years. His last fight was against Islam Makhachev. Even though he lost that fight, and I thought he lost that fight, his stock went up because he was able to grapple with Islam Makhachev. He was able to stuff some takedowns. And I know ultimately he lost, and ultimately I believe he lost 3-2, even 4-1. I think you could give it to Islam Makhachev. And ultimately he did end up getting his back taken, and then he was on the ground for a bit. But I mean, to go up to lightweight against one of the best lightweights in the world in Islam Makhachev, potentially one of the greatest lightweights of all time, and have that competitive of a fight, even though I expected that to be a competitive fight. I know a lot of people thought Alexander Volkanovski was going to get washed. I expected it to be competitive. It was still super impressive. But you look at his featherweight resume, beat the brakes off of Max Holloway the last time they fought in the trilogy at UFC 276. You look at the fight before that, destroyed Chan Sung Jung. You look at the fight before that, he beat the brakes off of Brian Ortega. I know people like to act like, oh, this was fight of the year. It was not fight of the year. Brian Ortega had 2 close submission attempts. Outside of that, he got his ass whooped for 5 rounds. And I don't even know how he survived. The fight before that, he beat Max Holloway. I thought he beat Max Holloway all 3 times. I thought they were pretty clear. I think the second one was the closest fight. But it doesn't even matter anymore because he beat the brakes off of him in the 3rd fight. At UFC 276, he dominated him. He outstruck him. He won 50-45. It was the most dominant win of the 3 fights. And Volkanovski, he's only 34 years old. So he's arguably in his prime right now. He's not particularly old. He's 5'6", 71.5-inch reach. So Volkanovski, I expected Yair to have a couple-inch reach advantage. Volkanovski actually has a half-inch reach advantage. But Yair does have a 5-inch height advantage. So that's going to be very interesting. Yair Rodriguez, 15-3, beat Josh Emmett for the interim title in his last fight, beat the brakes off him, beat him up with horrible leg kicks and body kicks, and landed a flying knee that inevitably Josh Emmett took him down and then got triangle choked. The fight before that, he beat Brian Ortega. And I defend this fight because a lot of people say, oh, this was a fluke. This was a random injury that shouldn't have happened. It doesn't really count. He was setting up an armbar, and Brian Ortega defending the armbar caused his shoulder to pop out. So I consider this a submission win for Brian Ortega. But what I will say about those wins, I think Brian Ortega is one of the biggest frauds in the featherweight division. He has 1 win in the last 5 years, and it's against the Korean Zombie. So even though people say it was a fluky win, I don't think it was. Brian Ortega is a fraud. And then the Josh Emmett fight, I thought Josh Emmett lost the fight to Dan Ige. I thought Josh Emmett lost the fight to Calvin Kattar. So Josh Emmett, even though he's good, he's very one-dimensional in the way he fights. But Yair looked incredible in both these fights because even before Brian Ortega, he submitted Brian Ortega or injured Brian Ortega, he was lighting him up on the feet. But one thing I did see there, Brian Ortega was able to take him down. And then you go to his last loss a year and a half ago. How was that a year and a half ago already? Against Max Holloway, the guy that Volkanovski has beat clearly 3 times. Or at least twice, you can say, because I think the first and third were very clearly. And in that fight against Max Holloway, Yair exceeded expectations, but Max Holloway was really putting it on him. And in that 3rd and 4th round, I couldn't believe when I went back and rewatched it. It was a dominant 3rd and 4th round. At times, Max Holloway had the full mount and was beating him up on the ground and controlling him on the ground. And I just think Yair's grappling, we've seen over the years, it has improved. But I can't get out of my mind going back to that Frankie Edgar fight 4 or 5 years ago, where Frankie Edgar just took him down repeatedly and beat him up. And, that Max Holloway loss, Max Holloway's not some elite level wrestler. Max Holloway, I believe he got taken down once or twice against Volkanovski. He was never controlled for a significant period of time, but Max Holloway got controlled there. But I do think Yair is a very difficult stylistic matchup that Alexander Volkanovski hasn't seen before. His kicks are unbelievably fast. His kicks are unbelievably powerful. And I think Yair Rodriguez could be the guy to dethrone Alexander Volkanovski because he's just so good and he's so fast. But that being said, I think Yair has to get a finish. I think he has to find a finish in the first 3 rounds. KO or maybe a submission. Yair's one of the most ferocious fighters I've ever seen in the cage. But with all that being said, my official prediction is Alexander Volkanovski via decision. I just think Volkanovski's too well-rounded, and I have a hard time imagining him getting finished by anyone. So I just don't think that Yair can get it done in those first 3 rounds. For a while now, for the last couple of weeks, I've been leaning Yair. But then I went back and rewatched some of those fights, and then I started to put him in context. And I'm like, nah, Volkanovski's just too good. Volkanovski, especially with having the threat of the takedown and his elite level striking, will be able to land on the feet of Yair. And unless Yair finds a nasty body kick that shuts off Alexander Volkanovski, or he chews up the leg, or he lands a bicycle kick to the head, or a spinning heel kick, I don't think he beats Volkanovski if this fight goes long. And I just think Volkanovski has more paths to victory. I think Volkanovski's most likely path to victory is via decision, but I think he could stop him in the later rounds as well because Yair starts to wear down. He has better stamina than I thought, but he really started to fade in the 4th round of that Max Holloway fight. He came out and had a resurgence in the 5th round, but I think it was because Max Holloway's output in the 4th round. So I think Yair's very durable. I think he has good stamina, but I just think Volkanovski is just way too durable himself and way too well-rounded. And I think Volkanovski, in his last fight, he got outstruck by Islam Makhachev. for the majority of the fight. And that was because of the threat of the takedown of Islam Makhachev. And I think in this fight, Alexander Volkanovski has that very same advantage. Yair Rodriguez will be worried about the takedown from Volk. Therefore, Volk will be able to land on the feet. And I just think Yair may catch him early, may clip him up early. But I just don't think it's going to be enough to put Alexander Volkanovski away. And, you know, I just watched that third and fourth round from Max Holloway. I think as the fight goes on, I think you're going to see Volkanovski start to bully him in the clinch, take him down, beat him up on the ground. And I think later in the fight, you might see Volkanovski not even grapple anymore because that's how confident he'll be in a slowed Yair Rodriguez. But with that being said, Yair, he's so ferocious. He throws power in every shot. Even off his back, he's throwing hellacious elbows, hellacious hammer fists from the bottom, and he never accepts the position. And he has improved vastly. And the Max Holloway fight, he was coming off a long layoff. He was coming off something like a 2-year layoff before the Max Holloway fight. So maybe he wasn't at his best in that fight. And I do think he's been improving as well. He's still super young. He's 30 years old. But ultimately, I think Volkanovski's just too well-rounded. He's too good. And I think Volkanovski gets it done via decision. I think he's going to mix in everything. I think you're just going to see a quintessential Alexander Volkanovski performance where he's landing on the feet, he's mixing in the grappling, he's bullying him in the clinch. And I think unless Yair gets it done in those first 2 rounds, I think Alexander Volkanovski wins via decision. I could see maybe Yair getting 1 round. Maybe he's circling well, kicking the legs, kicking the body, wins around that way. Volkanovski's kind of being conservative. But outside of that, I think Volkanovski's going to win this fight. And unless Yair finds that kill shot, Volkanovski gets it done via decision or maybe a late 4th or 5th round TKO. Look how good he looked in the 5th round against Islam Makhachev. So I'm very intrigued in this fight. I absolutely love this matchup. I think stylistically it's very interesting. And I wonder, the other X factor in this fight is how's Volkanovski? He just fought in February. How is it for him going up in weight and then coming back down to 45? Is that going to have an effect on him? I'm curious about that. But either way, I think Volkanovski's fight IQ, his stamina, his striking, his wrestling, his overall just game, there's really no holes in Volkanovski's game. I do worry, though, he does lean into some kind of kick sometimes. He got caught with the head kick from Islam Makhachev. I worry about that against Yair Rodriguez, who's super dynamic. And I think Yair can get it done. Honestly, Yair may very well get this done, but I just think Volkanovski, any situation he's put in, he will grit it out, and he will be able to win this fight in the later rounds, even if he were to lose the first 2 rounds. I'm going Alexander Volkanovski via decision. I'll probably say 49-46 decision for Volkanovski. Let me know what you guys think of all my predictions down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.